Hello and welcome to this Retribution Paladin DPS guide for 6.2 Warlords of Draenor. If you wish to skip to a particular section of the guide, then please use the annotations above or click the links in the description down below. First thing I want to cover now is talents. Your first tier talent is a movement speed increase, my favourite of which is Pursuit of Justice, as it adds a constant passive movement speed increase that stacks with your gift enchantment and any speed that you find on gear. Long Arm the Law isn't 100% uptime and requires you to be in range of an enemy to judge them in order to get the increase, so it's not particularly useful for returning to the boss after moving for a mechanic. Speed of Light is a very powerful burst movement increase that's useful on fights such as Archimonde if you find that you're getting yourself caught in the allure of flames, unable to move quick enough, then Speed of Light will get you out of there. The next tier of talents is a CC, which is not particularly useful for raids. Repentance doesn't really stack up against Hunter Traps, Polymorphs and the saps of the rogues, so it's not a talent that you'll really need to take. Blinding Light, PvP talent really, leaving just Fist of Justice, which has its uses for controlling ads. The next tier is your hybrid tier. Eternal Flame uses Holy Power. Holy Power is your DPS, so it's not a talent that we will be using. Sacred Shield is good for progress fights when your healers are struggling, but I personally believe that it's far too many global cooldowns for a playstyle as wild and hectic as a Ret Paladin, leaving Selfless Healer, which just passively stacks up on you as you do your rotation. It heals very strong on a friend and fairly strong even on yourself. It's instant, it has no mana cost, and so it's just a very useful thing for you to have. The next tier is really between Unbreakable Spirit and Clemency. Clemency is good if you're on a progress boss, again where you want to make use of your hybrid abilities to get these double Hand of Sacrifice, double Hand of Protection out on people who might need them. I think Unbreakable Spirit really is the go-to though, because it gives you more access to your personal cooldowns, allowing you to be more useful, to soak more things, and to get away with more. Next tier, Holy Avenger, again PvP, so it's a choice between these two. I personally prefer Sanctified Wrath in almost every situation because it's very reliable. Also with your Hellfire Citadel 2 set, you will now have 3 charges of Avenging Wrath, allowing you to use 4, 5, even possibly 6 uses of Avenging Wrath in a particularly long boss fight, and having 50% more length on the buff gives you incredible amount of uptime. Divine Purpose can give you these moments of glorious AoE, but they're not controllable. RNG will let you down, and it's just not a talent that I find reliable enough, so I just generally don't use it. The next tier, Holy Prism, suffers from the same issue as Sacred Shield, being that it's far too many global cooldowns to really fit in the Retribution playstyle, giving you a choice between Light's Hammer and Execution Sentence. Light's Hammer is the AoE choice, Execution Sentence is the single target choice. However, I would like to point out that Light's Hammer, much like the Warrior's Ravager, once you place it down, that's where it will be. So in a situation where you can't rely on your tanks to keep the ads still, or Execution Sentence is still probably going to be the best choice for you. Next set of talents, Empowered Seals, as far as I have ever seen, is simply not a DPS increase. It's a game changer in terms of playstyle, so if you're finding that you're feeling perhaps your paladin's a bit stale, Empowered Seals could spice it up for you and give you, something else to work on. Seraphim has been sim-crafted at ever so slightly more single target DPS. However, it's much more complicated to use, and really isn't that much better for single target than Final Verdict, which is very, very easy to use. It works well with your Mastery Hand of Light, which, as you see here, I've got almost 50% damage increase from my Mastery, and that stacks really well with the huge powerful hits that Final Verdict brings. Also, with the nature of raiding, especially recently with so many multi-target and ad heavy fights, you're finding yourself up against classes like Frost DK who are dual wielding, stacking tons of mastery and doing these humongous howling blasts and absolutely wrecking the damage meter. And Final Verdict will allow you to have a lot better AoE ability at the same time as maintaining your single target usefulness. So that's definitely something to think about. Next section is glyphs. I think this glyph, Hand of Sacrifice, is the only really mandatory glyph for a Retribution, as your Hand of Sacrifice is an incredibly powerful cooldown. 30% damage reduction for 12 seconds, it's on par with healer abilities like Pain Suppression. What this glyph will do is stop the damage that you reduce from being redirected to you and killing you, so very useful. Glyph of Divine Storm isn't as powerful now as it used to be. I believe it was 4% of your health that it used to heal. Even so, despite the nerf, I still think this is, a very useful talent. Well, glyph, sorry. And I'll generally find that I'll swap between this and Divine Protection. Divine Protection adds a physical damage reduction element to your cooldown Divine Protection. You do need to be aware of whether or not this glyph is going to be worthwhile. So if you know that there's lots of physical damage on a boss, then amazing. Glyph of Templar's Verdict adds a further damage reduction to your Templar's Verdict and Exorcism, being 10% for 6 seconds after you use them. You will be keeping a pretty high uptime on this as long as you're dealing damage, so it kind of allows you to not be that guy that always needs a pain suppression when there's problems. Nobody wants to be that guy. Your stat priority, very, very simple. Mastery is absolutely your best secondary stat. You want to get it on as many bits of gear as possible. You want to gem and enchant, always Mastery. Haste, multi-strike and crit are pretty much even in terms of the next stat. Your worst stat being versatility, as it is for most classes. And that's pretty much it for setting up your pally, so I'll see you at the training dummy for the next section. And here we are for the final part of this guide, which is the rotation. Now, as I'm sure many of you are aware, there isn't an official rotation for any of the classes in World of Warcraft these days. Instead, what we have is what we would call a priority system. And the priority system for your Retribution Paladin is below 5 Holy Power, you will use your Holy Power generators, and at 5 Holy Power, you will use your Holy Power spenders. Now bear in mind that if all of your Holy Power generators are on cooldown, and you have 3 Holy Power or 4 Holy Power, then you will use that time to cast your Final Verdict for single target, and your Divine Storm for multi-target. A quick look at how this talent Final Verdict will affect your AoE or your cleave rotation is anytime you need to cleave, as long as the ads won't die so fast that you won't get the opportunity to do a Divine Storm, then we're always looking to do a Final Verdict first and then a Divine Storm, then a Final Verdict and Divine Storm again. And what this will do is make use of the 100% damage buff to Divine Storm. Your Seal of Truth is your single target, and your Seal of Righteousness is your multi-target, although I think really Seal of Righteousness only becomes better if you have a large number, i.e. 5 or more adds that will live for at least 15 to 20 seconds. The order of priority for your Holy Power generators is Hammer of Wrath when it's available, Crusader Strike, followed by Judgment, followed by Exorcism. For large groups of targets you will use Hammer of the Righteous in place of Crusader Strike. Now in terms of your opener, you want to be popping Avenging Wrath at the beginning, and your Execution Sentence should be your first spell out, followed by Hammer of Wrath, followed by your Crusader Strike, followed by your Judgment. However, because of this talent Sanctified Wrath, which we will be taking most of the time, and it reduces the cooldown of your Hammer of Wrath, you will often find that you're not going to have time to use all of your Holy Power generators. So your opening rotation will look more like Hammer of Wrath, Crusader Strike, Hammer of Wrath again, Final Verdict, Hammer of Wrath again, Crusader Strike, Hammer of Wrath, back to Final Verdict, and we will mostly be ignoring these two because we simply do not have time to fit them into our rotation and they are not as much damage as these two. So with those in mind, let's have a little go at our opener.